What is up, everyone, and welcome to a new series on the channel we're calling 8-Hour Truth, where we take a look at all sorts of games under the scope of an 8-hour time period, dissecting the gameplay mechanics, the story, and overall enjoyment factor to see if it's worth the time playing, or if it belongs in the eternal dumpster fire of video game purgatory. Today, we're starting off with a little game called Moonlighter, so buckle up, get your popcorn ready, or your wallets if you really want to know if this game belongs in your library, and enjoy the show. Moonlighter is an adventure RPG. It's pretty standard stuff by now, but it also falls under the roguelike category, and if you don't know what that means, I'll explain. A roguelike, first of all, is a subcategory of games where levels, enemies, and such are procedurally generated. Basically, everything is random, meaning every playthrough is slightly different. A roguelite, on the other hand, which Moonlighter falls under, follows the same formula, but with a dash of permanent upgrades throughout the game. Stuff you have to grind to achieve for later playthroughs or runs. Now that we have that cleared up, though, things should make more sense when we talk about the actual gameplay. But now let's set up the scene. The story is set in a small town called Renoa. Full of merchants and adventurers who sought this place because of a sudden appearance of these dungeons where amazing loot could be found. People sold things here for years, but it seems that the town has gotten worse over time. Our story follows a young man named Will and his family before him who had owned a shop called the Moonlighter. Ding, ding, ding! And there we go, folks. They said it. They said the name of the title of the game. We can all go home now. Will now runs the shop and ventures into the dungeon gathering stuff to sell, but he really wants to uncover the secrets of this mysterious fifth door dungeon, which, by big surprise to everyone, is locked until we suffer through 4 other dungeons, and without getting ahead of myself, I say suffer because of what we have to go through. The game begins and we're already in a dungeon. The devs give us a tutorial which is simple and honestly really refreshing because it's not so in your face and making you pause to talk to you, or talk at you, for now. Once learning such mechanics like dodge rolling, attacking with a broom for some reason, and how to use potions, you're now ready to take on this dungeon. Or so you would think, until the game hits you with one of the biggest gaming cliches, an unbeatable room which ultimately leads to your death. Don't worry though, in all roguelike fashion we respawn outside the dungeon, except knocked out. And then we're just waiting to be helped by an odd old man, apparently, and his name is Xenon. It really should be something more like Tut, because he's just this game's walking tutorial for the next gameplay mechanic. After helping our pathetic selves that couldn't beat the impossible room, he does get us back to our store, the Moonlighter, where the old man hits us with our favorite, definitely overused Legend of Zelda reference. But hey, at least we get a new sword and shield out of it. Then we're tasked with learning all about running a 9-to-5 job. The best mechanic in the game, and this game just got too real. No, a big part of the game, as we learn from the lore, is that the dungeon holds goodies that we need to collect and sell. So Old Man Tut here shows us the world of capitalism, yay! Essentially how our customers will interact with our wares, if something is priced right, or something is priced too expensive. You can then adjust the prices by approaching the table, and honestly, I was ready to rip this apart, because I was adjusting prices one by one with the stick, which is super slow. It's faster if you mash the D-pad, but as much as this game was feeding me information, telling me so much, and it was just like impacting my brain, okay, I'm expecting it to tell me everything, it never told me I could move over by decimals! I mean, tens, hundreds, and so on. I mean, I could have assumed it, but for a while, I was just sitting there mashing the button like a complete idiot. So after we've learned how to run a business, we leave the house with Tut, and he explains to you to go back to the dungeon and collect more stuff, but use your pendant when you need to get out, and we'll touch on that a little later. He lets us know that dungeons are more dangerous at night, but you can get better loot, which also means you can go to the dungeons during the day, but in my experience from playing, you're going to find yourself going to the dungeons at night anyway, because 1, you want more loot that's better, and 2, you're running the damn store the whole day. So we've done a tutorial for the dungeon, we've done a tutorial for the shop, and we're ready to get to our first real playthrough of the game in the dungeon. So we head over there, and once again, we get suckered into it. We get suckered into more lore and more tutorial. After we clear a few rooms, We find a sketch, a skeleton that's chilling there with a message for us. It's just there to teach us about using the pendant, which costs money to send you back to town. Now, this is an important feature because if you don't want to die and lose all your stuff, you go back to town as fast as you can if your loot is full, or if not full, just depending on what you have and you don't want to lose and how confident you're feeling in your run. And that is totally important, and I get that. But man, I kept thinking, when am I going to be able to play? After being forced back into the town for the last time, and I swear I hope it's the last time, we're talking to Old Man Tut, and he tells us one last tidbit of information, which is to invest money back into the town. This will help bring things in, like blacksmiths, potion makers, and so on. As we begin to actually explore the town, we can see other upgrades, like upgrading the store to a bigger store, or getting a fancy cash register that will make people tip you more. Because, when I'm at a local Walmart and I see a top-tier cash register, I think, yes, I am definitely going to unload my pockets. But in all honesty, these will be useful upgrades, regardless of how weird they are. And all of this is fine and dandy until you realize how much of a grind you're about to be in. And I want to preface what I'm about to talk about by saying I like games when you have to grind. Roguelites, unlike roguelikes, generally have a meta progression system that isn't for everyone, and I know that going in, but Moonlighter is a different beast. If you haven't already come to this conclusion or had this thought, I'm just going to say it. The game is essentially Legend of Zelda meets Animal Crossing. From dungeon crawling to town building, that can be a hard thing to mix, and I feel the concept sometimes is done well, but most of the time it lacks in execution. When we actually head into our our first real dungeon playthrough, we quickly realize how fast our inventory fills up, and that the enemies hit pretty hard, even tiny slimes ticking for 9 HP out of our 100 HP. So once we've looted up, we're headed back to town to set up shop and start selling. And I'm gonna tell you, this is where I believe the loss of brain cells begins. We get back, we open shop to sell through our inventory, which I'm gonna tell you could not be any slower. I don't care about waiting around for stuff, but man, sometimes you're like watching the customer and all you can think is just buy something so I can move on. And that's if they like your prices, of course, because as we learned earlier from Tut, you need to price things accordingly. So it's a learning process, which is extremely valid. Happy eyes means it's a good price, and they buy it. Disappointed means bad price. Angry eyes, it's a horrible price. And money eyes means you're charging too cheap and should up the price. But that being said, if someone makes a disappointed face, they may still begrudgingly buy the item. So sometimes you're wasting time with an item you've overpriced and have to adjust it, or sometimes underselling stuff you should have charged more for. It took me forever to sell these stupid pieces of metal at the right price, because when I finally put it up to 300, that was a good price, when nothing else so far in the game had been as valuable. So I sold tons underpriced. So once you spend all this time at the shop all day, it's time to get back to the dungeon. But then, as we just mentioned, you're only going to be in that dungeon for such a small amount of time before having to warp back. I found myself warping back and forth over and over most of the time. I just spent running the shop rather than exploring, making the game feel kind of stale. When I would enter a dungeon, I could feel how weak I was, and I had some issues sometimes with lag spikes, which in all fairness could be version specific, but playing on a PS5, it shouldn't be bugging out like that. I even had a couple moments where sword strikes weren't connecting on certain angles, but then later it did, even though it was on the same angle, and it was a bit frustrating. My progress amounted to me getting past the first floor with a mini-boss, but after that, the next floor was much stronger. The mini-boss there slaughtered me, which meant the only thing to do was grind. Which, once again, I don't hate that, but it felt like a lot of waiting around, like a mobile game, while you're in the shop. And thus, my grind began. Around the 3 hour mark, I learned a lot. My prices were locked in, my store was upgraded to level 2 with improved sales storage space, my cash register was now a level 2 Walmart register, getting me some tip money, and I had upgraded the town to have the blacksmith, potion maker, and another vendor that could sell me material if I needed. Which comes to the next area of decision making, selling versus holding on to material. I wasn't making any dungeon progress because I needed my money and material to craft armor and upgrade my current weapon. Armor gave me additional health and some movement speed and more DPS from the sword upgrade. The game did start to feel better at this point, and it may be an internal hidden mechanic, but it felt like the first and second floor of the dungeon became longer before finding the mini boss, which I should mention right before the mini boss, you do find these little healing pools. There is a limit to how much they can heal you, but it is a great mechanic. Once I had finally upgraded my sword and got some proper armor, I was easily beating enemies. And when I hit the third floor, I acquired a new item that lets you use 2,000 gold to warp back to town for a one-time use checkpoint. It's a good option for the game for sure, once you have made some progress of course, so it definitely gains some points back there. But that is costly considering you are trying to earn money. And what if you die in the dungeon and lose all your stuff? It's a gamble, and it could be a huge loss. Another mechanic I realized was the potion maker can enhance equipment like my armor and weapon at the cost of material and money. I needed this badly, but I was so annoyed to find out that I had to give my armor? The armor I had the blacksmith make, and actually all of the armor he makes, doesn't give you defense stat, just health. So if you actually want armor to act how armor should, you need to enhance it. A couple other things that I had learned was that I had randomly earned these kind of little buddies in the dungeon that appear beside your store. And honestly, I have no idea how I got them, but this one is like a little drone that looks like one of the other enemies in the dungeon. He attacks, he does a little bit of damage, not much, but he also goes around and picks up items that enemies drop and he brings it to you. This is a nice little element to the game, and hopefully I can collect better companions in the future, if I figure out how. The other thing that I learned was on the end day report, after you've run the shop for the day, I noticed what looked like a robber icon, which I could only assume meant something else to deal with while I was in the store. And what do you know, soon enough I had my first attempted robbery at the Moonlighter. We finally go for our first third floor attempt and come across this weird portal door on the first floor, which leads us to a room with a couple enemies with a different dungeon aesthetic. My only assumption is that this is a glimpse into the next dungeon later on. When we actually hit the third floor, we start to see some new enemies, as well as we notice a new chest we haven't seen before, which contained a new piece of equipment, a ring. That's nice and all, but it didn't actually tell us what it did. And as I traversed further in, there was a room with some stronger enemies, and clearing the room took a bit longer than usual, when all of a sudden Buddy from Ghostbusters shows up, and he doesn't look happy at all, and I really wasn't sure what he did, one-touch death mechanic, or send you back to the beginning of the room, or the floor type of deal, and I didn't really want to find out. Soon enough, I make it to the boss of the floor, which turns out to be the boss of the dungeon, the Golem King. I was strong enough at this point to where I could literally just tank his hits and mash attacks against him, but all his attacks were pretty easy to dodge anyway. Once he cycled through his attacks, I believe twice, he was taken care of, and we had officially beat our first dungeon and collect our rewards from the cool looking chest. After that, we hit a portal out and we get a little cutscene showing the key we obtained has entered into the first lock of the mysterious fifth door. This was about 4.5 hours of gameplay. I do believe I was progressing slow. I was taking my time, I was learning things, and to be honest, the first couple floors made me feel really weak. So it's possible that I overgrinded for the first dungeon based off the fear of being too weak and losing all my loot. This is a tough decision for developers to make. Making your game too easy or too hard. It's a difficult thing to balance. And what they've done with Moonlighter is give the illusion that you're gonna need to grind like crazy. And to be honest, I think I did over-level myself or over-grind. But knowing that that's only the first dungeon, I think the same process might repeat itself within Dungeon 2, 3, 4, and so on. But I guess we'll have to see when we get to Dungeon 2. As we continue on and tackle the second dungeon, I wanted to spare you the time because, as we predicted, the game became more rinse and repeat with more grinding. It's like Ash Ketchum when he goes to any new region in the show and his Pokemon, including his best pal Pikachu, goes from fighting legendaries like Cynthia's Rayquaza to struggling against dudes like this. So, in the interest of time, here are the highlights from the second dungeon grind. As we guessed, the second dungeon looked like that forest area that we saw in Dungeon 1 with that special door. We also came across another special door that lets us see what the third dungeon will look like. We found out the game has these little sparkles in the pitfalls which lead you to secret rooms. In this case, I found a small challenge room, but the rewards were really underwhelming. The game does introduce you to new enemies, thankfully, so at least we know that the devs were not lazy. Our Ghostbuster buddy showed up again, and yes, since it bothered me, I know it bothered you, so this time I did let him hit me. Bam! One hit kill mechanic. So we will be running away from now on. The second dungeon mini-boss was this tree, which was giving me Wispy Woods Kirby nostalgia, and to be honest, it was really easy. Outside of the dungeon, we unlocked the Hawker. He lets you buy accessories for the store, which gives you different upgrades with different passive abilities like more tips or customers that move faster, which was amazing because I had complained about it before. Although, you will need to get the store upgrades to make full use of this. You are very limited on what accessories you can put out based on your store level. This time around, I came up with a new strategy to do 3 dungeon runs before opening shop to try to maximize my time, but I was still finding this was a long process before I even felt comfortable fighting the second dungeon boss. With 3 hours left in my journey, I had started playing the game at 10 PM, taking forever before I had enough money to upgrade to all the next weapon and armor sets and get the enhancements for them. Finally making it to the second dungeon boss, I was met up with Carnivorous Mute. This giant sprout was much easier than playing the dungeon itself, which was filled with annoying enemies and acid pits everywhere. I'm seeing a common theme. I barely saw any of this thing's moves, and once again, you're pretty much able to just take all of its hits, especially if you have potions. Once we cleaned up this boss, we obtained the second key, reap the rewards, and head out to get scolded again by Tut. The last time I'm gonna hear from you, old man, and I'm very happy about it. Checking the time, it was almost 1 AM in the morning, meaning my 8-hour clock was almost out. We spent the last bit of time burning money on whatever we could. Here's what the end of my 8-hour adventure looked like. 2 out of 5 dungeons completed. 2 store upgrades, which gave me fancy display cases and extra room to place things that I got from the Hawker. An upgraded bed, which gave me bonus health for the dungeons. And the best Walmart cash register money can buy, which upgraded my tips to 40% from customers. My armor and sword was leveled up twice with multiple enhancements made to each, and I ended up with 2 ring accessories which, after looking up online because I had no description in the game whatsoever from what I could see, one of them gave me an additional damage boost while also forcing that Ghostbuster buddy to show up so often, and the other one gave me additional health. Overall, I think I ended up with a decent setup, but what did we think of Moonlighter? The truth about Moonlighter is that a good concept was created, but constructed with what feels like too many cliche trendy themes from other games at an attempt to please too many audiences. Was the story for this game good? Yes. The idea that a shopkeep has to dive deep into a dungeon for a living with a passion to find the truth is very compelling, but when you attempt to make a roguelite genre game, the story you plan gets lost because we are barely exposed to it as we progress. Sure, there's many times you can find logbooks throughout the dungeon, but it's a real snooze fest when you're trying to loot a dungeon, and whenever you enter a room that has one of these logbooks, you're more likely to walk right back out without even looking at it. Did the gameplay hit the spot? Truthfully, no. There isn't anything overly satisfying about the combat system or the shop system for that matter. As mentioned earlier, there were many bugs I encountered, whether it be lag or oddities in the combat, but realistically, the game sometimes felt clunky. Not all of the aspects were bad though. Like we saw before, you can see that the care the devs put into this game when it came to the gameplay mechanics and helping the player out, whether it be healing pools, the easy dodge rolling, which was great because it gave you those invincibility frames. Not all games do that, but there was tons of other little things just like it. It's just hard to get past all of the repetitive grinding, which felt more like a chore than an achievement. And the last important question, was the game fun? This comes down to an odd yes and no answer. There were moments I was having fun going through dungeons, and when you have a good day at the shop and you see that end of day report, there's definitely some dopamine going through the brain when you see the long list of items you sold and the big bucks you made. This all gets counteracted by sluggish progression. If you compare this to other games in the genre or similar genre, like Enter the Gungeon or Binding of Isaac, one being a roguelite and the other being a roguelike, there are elements that make those games feel fresh or different for so many playthroughs until you make progress, and then the progress makes the game feel fresh. Moonlighter is lacking this. Your fun engagement never really changes until you do something like upgrade your weapon, and then for one playthrough you may say, wow, I'm stronger, but then revert to, oh, I'm still grinding. The fun doesn't match up to what the game sounds like it could be or should be. So, what is our consensus on Moonlighter? Should you play this game? Probably not. It may frustrate majority of players, but there is a player base for it. If you like grinding games, this could easily be your favorite brain rot game. But I say no. Don't add this to your library. So there you have it, folks. Moonlighter is a game that had potential, but has a serious case of identity crisis. Does it belong in the dumpster of video game purgatory? Not quite, but we might find it close by. But hey, they just showed off a trailer for Moonlighter 2 with a whole different look, so maybe they improved on a lot of things. I guess only time will tell. This has been Newt Gaming, and that was the 8-hour truth about Moonlighter. If there are games you would like to see an 8-hour truth about, drop it in the comments. With that, we will see you in the next one.